Okay, good morning, everyone. It is 10 a.m., so we will go ahead and get started. So we're gonna go over a few preliminary things in the beginning, but as you guys can see, we are going to have a presentation today that's going to be the majority of the meeting on mandated reporting. We have Sherry Williamson here with us. She's waving her hand. I'll let her introduce herself in a little bit, but she is going to be doing that presentation for us today. So as always in the beginning, I want to give Cynthia a chance to update you guys on anything she might have on background checks. Cynthia, you're with us.
Thank you, Jasmine.
Welcome.
We have nothing that's really updated in the system. Just make sure that if something goes automatically to not approve, that you give me a call so that we can look into it and we can see why it went to not approved. Most likely it's going to be a consent form issue. If you're having problems with anything, don't hesitate to reach out to me for the background checks. Does anybody have any questions for me?
All right. Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So for me on the placement side, I don't really have any updates for you guys either. Just a reminder that our next board meeting will be April the 17th. And the last day to submit board requests is April 3rd. So any questions or concerns about that, just email us, let us know. Chelsea, do you have any updates you need to communicate for residential side?
No, actually, we haven't had any major updates with the residential side. I just want to say thank you to everyone who's been reaching out for those intent trainings. We've got quite a few on the schedule. And if I haven't got back to you yet, I promise you are on my list. I will reach back out to you and we'll get that scheduled. We just have to find a time to get it on there. It's been a little crazy at the beginning of the month, of course, as I'm sure it is for most of you. But we will get those scheduled and we'll get out there and we'll provide any kind of support or extra help you guys need or want. I am really excited that Sherry is with us today, and I'm excited to see what she has to say and teach us a little bit. Thank you, guys.
Okay, so we've noticed that there's been a few questions about mandated reporting, what's required, what you have to do before reporting. So we have Sherry with us today to do this presentation to clear up any confusion or concerns. And I want to give her as much time as she needs to do this presentation. So you guys will be afforded the opportunity to ask questions and everything afterward. So Sherry, you can go ahead and introduce yourself and start your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. So a couple of disclaimers after I introduce myself before we get going on the presentation. My name is Sherry Williamson. I work for the Commission on Child Abuse, Rape, and Domestic Violence, and a big part of my job is providing trainings to mandated reporters. The laws change every 2 years. Some things have not changed in the 22 years I've been in this position, and some things have changed, then changed back to what they were before. It's somewhat baffling to watch sometimes, but I want to make sure that you all know that I very much appreciate the work you do. We adopted older children from foster care who had been in foster care for about 2.5 years before we adopted them. So I have seen firsthand how important it is for them to have access to good services, and whether they are in a residential setting or some type of other placement or with family members or in a licensed foster home, all of those things make all the difference in the world to these kids. So thank you all very much for the work that you are doing. I also want to let you know the presentation that I'm going to give you, my email address will be towards the end of it. And I want you to be comfortable reaching out to me. If you need a presentation for just your coworkers at the agency where you all work, I am funded by a federal grant. There is no charge. I can come in person. If you want to get a group together for me to come in person, we can do a Teams meeting, Zoom, whatever. But please know that I am here to help. And if I don't know the answer to your question, I have been doing this long enough, I have access to the people that I would need to ask to find the answer to your question. So I want you to be really comfortable reaching out if you have questions. My disclaimers are, number one, I have a cough drop in my mouth. I'm very sorry. My throat is very scratchy this morning, so I have cough drop in water. I also work full-time remotely since the pandemic. So there is a possibility that you may hear dogs barking in the background at some point. I'm sorry. They're ill-behaved and there's really nothing I can do about that. I have no one to blame but myself. Also, if you happen to see on the presentation, the title of it has 1 hour in it. I know that you all do not have an hour. I'm going to hit the high points of this presentation today. And as I said, you are welcome to reach out to me, even if you don't have time to have your question answered during this call. You're welcome to reach out to me by email and I'm happy to answer afterwards as well. Lastly, the last disclaimer is that I am not an attorney. I do a lot of work related to the Child Maltreatment Act, and I have to have a lot of conversations about those laws as they change and about mandated reporting. But please know that I have not been to law school. I always feel it's important to share that, especially if there's any possibility that I have an attorney on in the presentation. So this is the information that I'm going to cover with you all today. And it will all be in writing, even if it's something that I don't specifically go over. I don't like it when I go to presentations and people read to me, so I'm not going to read all the information on the slides to you. If you see something you have a question about, please feel free to ask it when we finish if I did not cover it during presentation. So to begin with, people sometimes ask me how one becomes a mandated reporter. I've had people email me, or when we were in the office and we received a lot of phone calls, people would call, especially after there would be some really high profile event happen that would show up on the news, whether it was the local news or national news. People would reach out to me and say they want to become a certified mandated reporter, as if there is some specific process one goes through. And that's not the way it happens. In the law, in Arkansas law, as in all of the other states, you are a mandated reporter in most situations based on your profession. In Arkansas, that's how it happens, is based on a profession or some role you choose to play, like becoming a foster parent makes you a mandated reporter, regardless of what your other profession is. In some states, everyone over the age of 18 or 21 is a mandated reporter. Arkansas has done that during this last session, but it's in very specific instances. But you all, because of the work you do, and I did clarify when I was asked to do the presentation to make sure that I knew that I was speaking to mandated reporters, you all, based on your profession, are absolutely mandated reporters, as are your coworkers, whether they know it or not. So in some ways, that can set mandated reporters up to fail, right? If you don't receive any training and you don't know exactly what it is you're supposed to report or how to make a report, but you are mandated by law to report, that can be kind of a dangerous situation. So thank you all very much for being on this call today. I understand that it is voluntary, and I also know that you have plenty of other work you could be doing instead of being on this call. So I'm really glad that you chose to participate in this training. So Arkansas law right now has 43, I believe, professions listed as mandated reporters, but some of those are really huge categories. For instance, employees of DHS. Well, DHS is the largest state agency in our state. I think there's around 7,000 employees. But I can assure you there are a lot of employees who don't realize that they're a mandated reporter, especially if they don't work directly with kids, because a lot of people think that's how the decision is made if you are someone who works directly with kids. So we have really broad categories like that, but we also have very specific categories, like child welfare ombudsman is a category. And I know for a fact, because that program is out of my office, that at this point in the state of Arkansas, we literally have 2 of those. So there's an entire category listed for 2 people. Educators, medical professionals, and medical professionals, it's even listed as something along the lines, I mean, there are separate categories like physician, surgeon, osteopath, nurse, but there's also a kind of a catch-all category that is medical professions involved in the admission, care, treatment of patients. So just to make sure that everyone is covered. So as you can see, there are a lot more mandated reporters than people realize. This is the most important slide in the whole presentation. So even if you get bored listening to how fast I talk, or I start coughing, or my dogs start barking, please pay attention to this slide. This is the absolutely most important slide in the whole presentation. This is generally when I see people starting to take their phones out to take pictures of it. And this is also the one that I will actually read to you, because this is directly out of the Child Maltreatment Act. It's just straight out of the law. People who are mandated by law to report, in the law, it says you shall immediately report to the child abuse hotline. And we're going to go over the different ways you have to report. But it says you shall immediately report to the child abuse hotline when you have reasonable cause to suspect a child has been subjected to abuse. So think about that, reasonable cause to suspect, not the child told you exactly how they got the bruises, or a parent opened up to you and confessed what, this really bad choice that they made, or something like that. You have corroborating evidence. It doesn't say any of those things. It says if you have reasonable cause to suspect. The other thing that's really important for mandated reporters to recognize is that these laws, and I always tell people, these presentations are not just to protect kids. Obviously, my primary concern is protecting kids. But you all, it's very important that you are also concerned with protecting yourself and your profession and your job and your livelihood. And so there are certain things that you have to be really aware of as mandated reporters. It says in the law that you shall immediately report to the child abuse hotline. I have been doing this job long enough that I remember when there were a lot of agencies, and this was a long time ago, there used to be agencies that it would say in their policy that you had to tell your supervisor before you call the hotline. You had to ask someone's permission before you call the hotline. There were internal meetings before people call the hotline. None of those things are legal. Just to be really clear, we had public school districts, large public school districts, that would say only the school counselor can call the hotline. Not legal. Also, and I have spoken to an attorney about this to verify, it's not a defense in court. So if your policy did say that, which I very seriously doubt any of them do at this point, if your policy did say that, no attorney is going to be willing to use that as a defense in court and it be successful. I've not found one example of it being successful that someone said, well, our policy says we're supposed to tell our supervisor. Policies, agency policies, and agency norms don't supersede state law or federal law, and they're not going to protect any type of licensure you have if there is some type of an issue. Excuse me, sorry. Telling a supervisor does not relieve you of your duty, and I have a really good example of this in the state of Arkansas. We had a situation where this was in a public school, but think about this in terms of what it would look like in the professional setting you work in, because it could be the exact same situation in any professional setting. There were a couple of mandated reporters who had enough of a concern that they definitely, absolutely had reasonable cause to suspect child abuse happened. They spoke to each other about it, realized that they shared the concern. And we don't have time for this today, but I will tell you, without going into great detail, best practices are to report directly to the hotline for a lot of different reasons. One being, it is incredibly traumatizing for these kids for this information to be shared with people who don't have to know it. So telling a coworker is involving someone most of the time who there's no reason for them to know it. That aside, these mandated reporters spoke to each other about it first, and they were trying to decide what to do. They all had a lot of respect for their principal, who had been a public school principal for many, many years and was very supportive of calls being made to the hotline, from what everyone involved in this said. They go and talk to the principal. The principal agrees. Absolutely, that needs to be called into the hotline. You guys go on back to your class. I've got all the information. I made all these notes. I'm going to take care of this. Everybody was under the impression the call was going to be made to the hotline. And I honestly don't know why it wasn't. Several days later, it may have been a couple of weeks later, a call was made to the hotline because one of the kids told their parent what was happening, which is another interesting but too long for today's story. Their parent called the hotline. When DCFS started doing the investigation and talking to kids started saying, I told my teacher, I talked to this person. So then the investigation, there ended up being a second investigation that was on the mandated reporters who had reasonable cause to suspect because none of them had called. All the teacher said, the principal said she was going to call. She didn't call. Guess who lost their licenses? They all lost their licenses and could not teach anymore because their principal said she was going to call. They all thought she was going to call. So think about what that would look like in your agency. And a lot of people say, well, we're all in this together and we're on a team. And I understand that. But when it comes to a point that whomever was going to call didn't call, it's not, it's not considered a defense for someone to say, I thought that person was going to call. And so this was not even involving criminal court. This was just, they all ended up on the central registry for failure to protect because abuse kept happening after they failed to call. So please keep that in mind. And that's part of the reason that I feel like this slide is the most important slide in a training where we're not talking about different indicators of abuse, where we're talking about what could actually happen with you failing to report. So that's what you need to make a report is reasonable cause to suspect. What needs to happen for that call to actually be accepted by the hotline is it's more tightly written, right? So you have to have an allegation that if it's true, it meets the legal definition of child maltreatment. So just remember, that's not what you need to make a report. That's not your job. That's the hotline's job. Do they have enough information to accept it? They have to have something, that meets the legal definition. So that's on the receiving end, but that's not on your reporting end, what actually needs to be your concern. Also enough information to locate the family. I don't have a slide in this presentation about this, but I always think it's important when I'm talking to any type of providers where you may have doctors, nurses, therapists. They very often will talk about HIPAA and privacy and not being able to share information. There's actually a provision in HIPAA that is an exception for reporting suspected child maltreatment, that you can share any information that you have about that child and family as long as you're sharing it with that agency in your state. That's the agency where you make reports or they do the investigation. So that would be Child Abuse Hotline, DCFS, Crimes Against Children Division of the State Police, if they come out to do an investigation. Local law, local law enforcement in some jurisdictions chooses to be involved in child maltreatment investigations. So you can share information with those folks and you're not going to be violating HIPAA. So that means that you can, in addition to details about what's going on in the family, you can share, where the parents work, social security numbers if necessary, last known address, any kind of information where the other children go to school, anything that you have that will help get them in touch with the family and the suspected victim. So these are the ways that you can report child maltreatment, and they're supposed to be at some point phasing out the fax reports. I don't know when that's going to happen, and I'm a little concerned. I don't know exactly how they're going to let people know that has happened. So if for some reason you choose to report by fax, you have to use the online, they have a fax form that you can Google for the Arkansas State Police fax form. So if you do choose to report by fax, please make sure you get that confirmation that it went through, and obviously that you stand there while the fax is happening so that you can make sure that you take the papers and nobody else gets them. Sorry, another cough drop. The best way to report, if we're not talking about a situation that seems like it's an emergency is this online reporting. I do a lot of trainings for school resource officers. And I got to tell you, police officers have absolutely no problem telling somebody if they don't like anything. They are one of the groups that I rely on when things change in the child welfare field to let me know very quickly if they have a problem with it. And as I started doing, I do, as I said, a lot of trainings, and I do them year round for people who are going to be new school resource officers because it changes. And I was really curious to see after this started if they were even going to use it. And in multiple trainings around the state, in different parts of the state, I had school resource officers come up to me after the training to say how happy they were with the online reporting process, which honestly kind of surprised me. But part of that is you go online and you set up an account because it's only for mandated reporters. So you have to give them an email address, and you're going to want to make sure that you use an email address that you are always going to have access to. We've had, say school teachers who leave one school district and move a school district over, so they have a new email address. Well, they can't access the old email address, so then that was how they set up their account. It gives you the information that you need back, I guess, as far as referral numbers or things like that, pretty quickly. And it asks a lot of questions. I had a couple of different SROs come up to me and suggest that I let other mandated reporters know they should go online before they have to make a report and go ahead and look at the way reports are made. There's apparently, I believe, a short video or training that you can take on the site to see how to do the report, so that if you ever have to make a report, you're not sitting there trying to set up your account before you make the report. So that's something that you all might want to consider doing when you have a few minutes throughout the day, if that ever actually happens for y'all, which from what I hear about what you do, I feel like I'm being optimistic, assuming you might have a few free minutes, but what can I say? I'm an optimist. So we had this added to the Child Maltreatment Act in 2007, the information on this slide, and it was based on a couple of different professional groups, one being, interestingly, private daycares. So this would be even private daycares that were licensed by DHS or through child care licensing, because they had daycare administrators who also happened to be the owner of the daycare, who were not letting teachers make reports of suspected child abuse. If a family had 2 or 3 kids in the center and they didn't think the abuse was too bad, or they couldn't prove it, they knew that that was the only place the kids went, and the parents would figure out they called, and the parents would pull their kids out, and then the center would lose that money each week from those kids. So they changed the law to say that agencies can't require you to do these certain things before you call the hotline. There are actually consequences for them not letting you call the hotline as well. I don't remember exactly what the charge is, but as mandated reporters, you all are protected when you report in good faith. And so that means basically, if you make a report to the hotline, and by process of elimination, the parents figure out who made the report to the hotline, and they come to you and say, I know you're the one who called the hotline. First of all, you don't have to give them any information about the fact that you called the hotline. But, we've had parents say, I didn't answer the door when they came to my house, so they finally showed up at my work, and then I was embarrassed because DHS was at my work and people think I've abused my kids, and I'm going to sue you. There has not been one successful case of someone suing a mandated reporter for making a report when that report was made in good faith. if you remember back to one of the earlier slides where it said you're supposed to report if you have a reasonable cause to suspect, that means you're almost throwing everything in except the kitchen sink. So you do have that legal protection. The flip side of it is because you have that legal protection, there's not really a reasonable excuse not to call the hotline as far as the law is concerned. So if you don't call the hotline, you can be sued. Let's say by a non-custodial parent, say custodial parent leaves bruises on the child sees you, tells you what happened, or you notice the bruises. Then 2 weeks later, they go to see their non-custodial parent and they say, oh, I told Miss So-and-so, you should have seen the bruises mom left on me. I told Miss So-and-so. That non-custodial parent would have standing to sue you for failure to report and subsequently failure to protect. There are also criminal penalties. So a prosecutor can choose to prosecute you for failure to report. I'm being completely honest with you guys today. That doesn't happen very often. We do not very often have in Arkansas prosecutors prosecuting people for failure to report, but we have had several situations where someone didn't report and they ended up being put on the child maltreatment registry for not reporting, and then they weren't able to get a lot of jobs. You know, they lose their job because they're now on the central registry, and then they're not able to get another job in their same field with all their job experience because they're on the child maltreatment registry. I also wanted you all to have access to the best way to look up the law. So this is the best way to look it up and see the current law if you have questions about it. You also can email me and I can pull something for you and send it to you if you don't want to look it up. But I'm enough of a nerd that I think this is kind of interesting. So you can go to the Arkansas legislative website and you can actually view anything you want to view in the Arkansas Code. The Child Maltreatment Act is in Title 12, Chapter 18. And if you are really interested in this and want to be able to do it, you can always reach out to me. We can set up a Zoom and I can walk you through it on my screen to show you how to do it if you have trouble with it. But it's also a way, that website is a way you can follow potential legislation. If you're interested in that, you can see bills that are filed during legislative session and see if it's something that you want to reach out to your elected official to say, obviously outside of your professional capacity, because I'm sure that you, like me, cannot do that related to your job. But this is the website where you would see bills that are filed and see if it's something that you want to reach out to your elected official to tell them that you support it or you're against it and tell them why. Again, that would be on from yourself personally, not from your agency. So this is my email address. Please notice my last name is Williamson with the S-O-N, and not Williams. And my middle initial is J as in Jane. And the reason I make sure that you notice if you're writing down my email address that it's Williamson Sherry J is because there is a very nice lady who works at UAMS named Sherry J. Williams without the O-N. And she gets really freaked out when she gets emails about child abuse. And it's funny, but she works in accounting. So I occasionally get an accounting email, which makes me want to cry because I hate dealing with numbers. But so please notice that my whole email address, williamsonsherryj@uams.edu. And then I'm going to give you guys a chance to ask questions, but then I also want to let you know, I mentioned briefly the Child Welfare Ombudsman. This is a program at the agency where I work, the Commission on Abuse. And the Child Welfare Ombudsman is someone who has the ability to look into complaints within the child welfare field, of how things are being handled in the child welfare field. She has direct relationships with the heads of different agencies in the child welfare field. So for instance, the head of DCFS, the head of the Crimes Against Children Division of the State Police, the attorneys ad litem, CASA programs, things like that. So she's fostered those relationships so she can reach out directly to them if there's an issue. She also can make recommendations to them if there are policies that need to be changed, if there's legislation that maybe need to be changed, if something's not being handled correctly in a case. I mean, I'm sure you all know from working with kids, especially, kids that are in foster care very often don't have someone to be a champion for them if things aren't going right for them. So you need someone to be able to reach out to say, things are not being done for this kid that need to be being done for this kid. And Stacia has been an attorney in the child welfare field for, I think, close to 30 years. So she's incredibly helpful and very knowledgeable, and even can just answer some questions sometimes if you have questions about how something's being handled. And she also has access to a lot of confidential information, like information from the CRIS system and court. So she can't share that information with you, but what I'm telling you is you can share information with her and know that she has those clearances and the information isn't going to go anywhere. The identified information isn't going to go anywhere. Okay. Does anybody have questions for me?
I have a comment and a question. I
Okay.
want to say I ditto the comment that the officer said about the online form. I love it because waiting on hold for hours was quite frustrating, and trying to make a report. So I do like the online form. And the question I have is, if you have two minors and one was, let's say, a male and female, and the male was touching the female inappropriately, I wasn't sure about that, but I did, just to be on the safe side. I called it in, but they said it was, I don't know, what do they call it, non-pros or something. I don't know. They didn't take it. So, what are your thoughts on that?
That is a great question. And I will pass on your approval of the online training to, of the online reporting to Major Drew at the Crimes Against Children Division of the State Police. We have so many, and I'm sure you all deal with this in your work as well. People are very quick to comment if they don't like something, but very often they don't get compliments, and goodness knows that the Crimes Against Children Division of the State Police, I'm sure, has to deal with that as well. So I'll let him know that. My thoughts on minors and sexual contact is that it's always better to be safe than sorry to report it. I don't completely understand those laws because a lot of it kind of bleeds over into the criminal area and sexual assault. But I have talked to, there is a woman at the prosecutor coordinator's office named Ginger Kimes, Kimes. And if you email me after this to remind me, I have some information that she sent me about different ages and the way, about the law and all of that. I always suggest to people to go ahead and report it, and here's why. Even if it's not accepted for investigation, you have made a record of there being an issue. And let's say you said that it was two minors and the male was touching the female inappropriately. Who's to say that a year from now, that same male might not touch a much, much younger female inappropriately, and then that needs to be reported, right? So you've documented that you had a concern about it. You've documented that you've reported it. So I always feel better personally, especially with the online reporting. So like you said, it's not a matter of, am I going to help the kids in front of me and deal with the kids in front of me, or am I going to make this report that I don't even know if they're going to accept it? When you can do that online reporting that's quicker and it's not going to take us long, just so that you know that you've put that information out there and that it's now documented, I always suggest people go ahead and document it. But back to, as far as sharing information with you, I do have an email. I need to find it, which is not a problem, from Ginger. And the thing to keep in mind, if you want me to share it with you, is that it would be as the laws stand today. And as I said, they change, so after another legislative session, that document might be outdated, but she's really the expert in the state on the difference in ages and all of that as far as criminal goes, the criminal aspect of it goes. Anyone else?
Okay, if no one else have any questions, thank you so much, Sherry, for doing that for us and doing that presentation. It was very informative and very useful. If anybody missed any of the presentation or just would like to review it again, just let me know. We do record these meetings and I can send the recording. And as Sherry mentioned, she is also available to come present at your agencies if you need for your employees. So please utilize that. As she said, it is free and it's very useful and helpful information. Before we go, I just want to make sure nobody else have any questions about this or about the information we presented at the beginning about any of the updates. I know I went through there pretty quickly trying to make sure Sherry had enough time to do her presentation. So are there any last minute questions about anything at all? Okay, Chelsea, do you have anything to add before we let everybody go?
No, nothing to add for the providers. I just want to say thank you, Sherry. That was very informative, and there's a lot of things in there that I was even unsure about. So I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today and give us a refresher. It was great.
Thank you for having me.
Jasmine, this is Monica. Could you introduce me to everybody so they'll know when I call or request information that I am a legit employee?
Sure. As Monica said, she is a legit employee, new here with us. She's our new administrative assistant. I know you guys usually directly contact your specialist, but sometimes you may hear from her or get emails from her, specifically, especially about board items. So she is our administrative assistant.
And this is Charlotte. I just wanted to throw in there, Monica has been with the agency, I believe, 24 years. So she has just a wealth of knowledge and it's just a really great asset to have on our team.
What is Monica's last name? I can't see it on the screen.
Barfield.
Thank you.
All right. So thank you everyone for joining. I hope you guys enjoyed this meeting as much as I did. We're gonna always, if anybody have any suggestions or anything else you guys would like us to present to you, give more information about, please let us know. All right.